What do we do, Yolanda, to minimize the disparity between what a customer sees and maybe expects and what might actually happen once they drive onto the lot and get an appraisal on their trade?
I think it's the transparency and language you use to, to describe the process to consumers, because every consumer, including myself, think my car is clean. And trust me, my car is not clean right now, but I do think it's an extra clean. And I think that's a big part of disparity. And also, as a consumer, we don't recognize like certain, I guess what I say, scratches and dents in our car and what they're really worth. So there is this perception that when you go into a dealer, you're automatically going to be told your car is worth less.
For the general consumer that might be tuning in because they're intrigued, what do these insiders talk about? I know a question they're asking is, does it make a difference if there's a dirty diaper in the back of my car?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I enjoy most about producing the Dealer Playbook is hearing from you. The messages that I get of people who are getting so much value out of the podcast, applying it to their day-to-day workflows and finding a thriving career right here in the retail auto industry. It means the world to me. And one of the ways that we make doing this possible is through my agency, Flex Dealer. And of course, in the spirit of providing value, I think this is a perfect time to head over to www.flexdealer.com to show even further support for you, my beloved DPB gang. Right now, if you go to my website, flexdealer.com, you can get a full free PDF of my #1 best-selling book, Don't Wait, Dominate. And the reason I think it's so special is that a lot of the topics that are discussed in this book are even more relevant today than ever with this surge in popularized AI and people wondering, well, what can I do next? How can I have a competitive advantage? Well, that's all here in this book. And so I'd love to be able to offer you a free copy of this. If you go to flexdealer.com, it would mean the world to me because that is how we continue to produce this show for you. Yolanda Biswah is the president of Canadian Black Book, Canada's leading provider of used vehicle valuations and residual value forecasts. She joined CBB in 2015, rose through sales and customer experience leadership, which we're going to have to dig into a little bit, including VP of Sales and SVP/GM, and was promoted to president in June 2023. Under her leadership, CBB continues to publish its annual Best Residual Value Awards, a bellwether for long-term asset performance used by OEMs, lenders, and retailers across the country. Biswah is a frequent industry voice on data-driven decision-making, talent development, and market dynamics. Yolanda, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'm wanting to go in so many different directions because there's things just in your bio I'm like, I need to know about, especially because I think they directly apply to topics we talk about, the impact of customer experience, the impact on customer experience for buying decisions, on retention, value propositions, unique placements in the market. I mean, there's so many things, but then there's also, I'm torn already. There's also the data side of this. I mean, like from your vantage point, maybe we'll start here. Your vantage point as president of CBB, you are seeing so much data. You have absolutely access to so much data.
For 65 years. Absolutely.
65 years of data. Okay. So just a little data pool. What are you looking at specifically that kind of gives you an indication of where the market's headed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at multiple different things. So, the base or the foundation of Canadian Black Book is the wholesale market. So, which is the wholesale data that comes through auctions, and we get data from Canadian auctions across Canada. And also we get upstream data from OEM partners, captives, different lenders, fleet companies as well. That goes into our proprietary methodology that determines a wholesale value. But more importantly, what changed during COVID is when there was no auction data or no upstream data, we had to pivot and we started looking at the retail market. And the retail market data has really become a big part of how we're able to mirror the two track the trend of the wholesale market against retail market data. And specifically, when we say retail market data, we're talking about, data or retail listings data that's put out in the market by dealers, not private consumers, but by dealers, and what they are like, what they're listing out in their websites. What does that trend look like? Because, dealers have they're very good at forecasting where they think that the values of their cars are going to be as well in their own. So yeah, and we also look at economic data. I have a team of economics majors and graduates. Who keep track of the Canadian economy, where the prediction is going, what are companies like Finch Rating saying, and we have like literally daily meetings to talk about the economy, which is a big part of what we're doing in automotive that's impacting everything that we do. I think it's probably the number one concern for everyone in automotive. Because that's really changed a lot. Like we're not able to forecast long term as we used to. Now it's very short term forecasting because we have to pivot all the time based on things that are changing. So yeah, I hope I answered that question. But
yeah, you definitely did, and you've got me thinking about. I mean, obviously, growing up in Canada, Canada is I don't have better words. It's like an international throughput for so many different things. Every time I talk to somebody in Canada, they are definitely looking at the Canadian market, but they have a very keen eye on European markets, on the U.S. market. When you look at Canadian data, in particular, wholesale data, what contrasts or similarities are you seeing to south of the border?
I would say probably there's, in terms of how values are changing in regards to whether the wholesale market is going up or going down, there are similarities, but our timelines are very different. And Canada is not as, our progression is gradual. You don't see huge steeps as you do in the U.S. We're much more gradual, much more stable market in terms of values, going down or going up. There's much more of a trend to that. Whereas in the U.S., sometimes you see like a huge fall and there are a huge, trend going up. Whereas in our market, we don't see that. And I think that's the difference. But in terms of similarity, it pretty much follows the same curve, but we're slower behind, to your question. Yeah.
I wonder, is it just differences in consumer sentiment? Is it financial based? Like, is it strictly financial based? Is it population based? Like, what do you think some of the contributing factors to why Canada can kind of move through it a little bit more?
I think we're not as reactive, but that's just my opinion. I don't.
I'm okay with an opinion.
We're not as reactive in terms of in harsh pivots and changes. Canadian consumers are cautious. I think that, if you talk about consumer experience, we know that, our Canadians are not online, putting their credit information all over the place looking for if they're approved for credit, right? It's still something that companies struggle with. I hear about it all the time, right? How do we get consumers to complete a credit process online? Whereas, south of the border, they do this very regularly. It's a standard practice. Right. So we're a little bit more, I think, cautious. You see that even with, when you saw inventory was down, when new car inventory was down, Canadians were holding on to their car. They were taking a longer time to go out and look for a new car or sell their current car, or whether or not they decide to repair it or keep it longer. You're just, I think, more strategic in our decision making and our spending. We hear all the time that we have huge amount of credits, but I think we choose wisely at how we use those credits, right? I think, my opinion, but
it is true. It is true. I mean, I think in my 39 years living in Canada, I can't remember, and I'm sure it happened, but I just can't remember a single time somebody where my phone was just getting blown up from people who had gotten my information from some sort of credit app that I had filled out, that now all of a sudden, in the 4.5 years that I've lived in Texas, I've thought about changing my phone number at least 7 times a day.
Yeah, it's very
and I think that is the proof point to what you're saying, which is you're right. Like, I even know moving here, people are very quick to put their personal kind of secure information into any website that promises to give them some sort of promise that, and then what they should be promising. The best promise is, we will call you 4,000 times a day and sell your information. That would be a promise they could all deliver on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this as it pertains to how the economy moves and or the economy of automotive moves. One of the things that CBB does is shows residual values, right? How should dealers use the CBB residuals to set day one price, day 15 adjustments, so on and so forth? Walk us through the cadence that you find works as a dealer's considering how to price units.
Well, I don't really want to comment on how they should price unit, but I think how you use the forecast values to determine,
Sure.
what that equity of that car is going to be as you price and sell a vehicle, right? If you know it's a brand that retains equity, then I think your remarketing plan needs to have shorter timelines, right? In terms of like bringing that client back. Because listen, I've been going to the same dealership probably for the last 12 or 15 years.
Oh, no kidding.
And part of it is because of the relationship you build at dealerships. And I think and dealer groups, which I think have that advantage now because you have multiple different brands within that group. And I think you cultivate that relationship with that consumer. And depending on the brand, depending on the model, and depending on the equity that car is going to have, you decide what that remarketing plan would look like for that consumer for, to bring them back, get them into a newer vehicle. And that's how you keep, the circle of life going, right? Within that consumer vehicle purchasing process, and also circle of life within their relationship with your dealership and your dealer group, right? I think that's something that in Canada, I think that we can improve upon. I have a lot of family in the U.S. and when I go out to visit them, they talk about when they go into a dealership to just do tire change. Like they're immediately like, upsold into a newer car. And I've gone in many, many service center and not upsold, been upsold a newer car. And I think it's one of the things that dealers, and I don't want to be the one to tell them how to run their business, can do better. And a part of that is using the forecast, residual value forecast to say, hey, this specific brand holds a value long term. This person is 2 years into the term. This car's got equity. Why don't I just, go in and say, hey, how would you like to what's your next car purchase? What are you thinking of buying? Or do you want to get a newer brand, a newer model to what you have is, refresh and upgraded? Do you want to test drive it? I think that's how you use the residual value process in your decision making. And I do think there's a lot of opportunities in that.
Hey, does your marketing agency suck? Listen, before we hop back into this episode, I know you know me as the host of the Dealer Playbook, but did you also know that I'm the CEO of Flex Dealer, an agency that's helping dealers capture better quality leads from local SEO and hyper-targeted ads that convert? So if you want to sell more cars and finally have a partner that's in it with you that doesn't suck, visit flexdealer.com. Let's hop back into this episode. You got my brain spinning. I immediately go from there to, I think, what's powering a lot of the market. I mean, even just still the spill off from supply chain shortages, where a lot of franchise dealers have become essentially used car dealers, right? Stocking up as many used vehicles as possible, which brings me from residual appraisals to the trade-in lane. From your vantage point, what recommendations? Because I know CBB is consumer facing as well, right? I can go to the CBB website, I can look up, and get all the information about my vehicle and have an idea. What do we do, Yolanda, to minimize the disparity between what a customer sees and maybe expects and what might actually happen once they drive onto the lot and get an appraisal on their trade?
I see multiple trade-in solutions out there. And then when I say trade-in solutions, I mean widgets and all sorts of other
gadgets and gizmos. Yeah.
I think it's the transparency and language you use to, to describe the process to consumers, because every consumer, including myself, think my car is clean. And trust me, my car is not clean right now, but I do think it's an extra clean. And I think that's a big part of disparity. And also, as a consumer, we don't recognize like certain, I guess, what I say, scratches and dents in our car and what they're really worth. And so there is this perception that when you go into a dealer, you're automatically going to be told your car is worth less. But in my experience, in most part, dealing with this is my own scientific, analysis of my family, they're always wrong. And majority of the time dealers are right, because I think that perception that dealers are always trying to steal a trade, I think that's gone. I don't think that's there anymore. I think that dealers do want to have relationships with consumers that are coming back and forth, and also that consumers are going to recommend their friends and family to come to their dealerships, because that's how most dealerships within your community operate. I live in Durham, where you have a certain German brand, and almost everyone in that region has, that brand, because they've formed relationships with the dealership partners within that region. And I think that dealers have become more wiser, much better at honing our relationship and making our relationship better. And I think that we just have to make sure that consumers understand that in that trade-in process, that they're going to evaluate your car and let you know what it's actually worth. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you were just saying earlier about the relationship that fosters loyalty. I mean, a lot of us are still trying to wrap our head around the fact that the best marketing we can do is provide a good, honest, transparent, and open communicative buying process the first time. Because like you just mentioned, Yolanda, you're going to go home. You're going to share the experience you had because you're excited about it and the vehicle you bought. And they're going to now be intrigued, whoever they are, and they're going to want to turn around and come to the dealership. And it's, to your point, there's so many different touch points. It's not just the initial transaction. It's how I'm being dealt with in service. It's how I'm being dealt with when I want to trade in.
Yeah. And it's taking the time with consumers, like in that when you take your trade in it before, I remember like 10 or 15 years ago, you would just be told, oh, this is what your car is worth. What you got on the website is incorrect. Now, the relationships that I've seen and experienced is like they'll walk you around your car and say, well, did you see this? Or did you notice this? Or you got a chip in the window and, things like that. And I think that has made fostering a relationship better because now you're able to really show the consumer, here's why your value is different than what my value is, right? Rather than just say, oh, what you got on the website is wrong. Here is what the correct value is. Because consumers is more information. We all know that. Social media, it's all about information, right? Yeah.
For the general consumer that might be tuning in because they're intrigued, what do these insiders talk about? I know a question they're asking is, does it make a difference if there's a dirty diaper in the back of my car when I bring it in for a trade? Are they going to care? Because I'll tell you, back in the day when I was doing merchandising for dealerships, I can't tell you how much garbage was in some of these cars. Is that going to impact the number, you think, or could it potentially impact? Should the consumer be thinking about getting their car vacuumed and detailed before they bring it to the dealership?
Absolutely. I think you should be getting it detailed or cleaned, as you shouldn't have garbage in your car, because I think that adds to, does this car have a smell that's not necessarily going to go away, right? It's a very easy one. Right?
They're like, look, we're going to market it as a family vehicle, but we didn't need to smell that it's a family vehicle.
Yeah, we don't need to smell the other family.
I love it. I'm curious about this. This seems to be a conversation I hear a lot about as we're going around to dealerships. It's, aging policies. And when I have aged units on my lot that aren't moving for whatever the reason might be, how can I get out of these units in a way that's not completely destroying my finances? People are always concerned about it, and rightfully so. What do you see from your, perhaps best practices or ideas that you've seen work well for dealers that can, dare I say, equitably move out of aged units?
Yeah, absolutely. It's data. I think they have to have view and access to data that tells them, like, you can dispose of this specific vehicle in Thunder Bay because there's a need for Honda Civics in Thunder Bay, right? I think that you can't just think just within Ontario or within the region. You have to expand across Canada on how you can dispose of vehicles, and utilize that data to do that. I think that, no one wants to take a loss. No one wants to have to, lower pricing just to get rid of a vehicle. They want to be able to maximize that. I just think it's data and utilizing. There are lots of data partners out there, that do things separate from Canadian Black Book that shows you how to best remarket your vehicle in other provinces or other regions. And I think those are some really good tools. Yeah.
Quick sidebar here before we forget. For those of you that are listening or watching, I need you to drop me a comment. Have you ever heard of a different place in the world that has a more bad name than Thunder Bay?
Exactly.
Talk about, like, that is, I mean, I've known about Thunder Bay my whole life, but for some reason, Yolanda, you just said it, and I'm like, that is a wicked name for a place.
It is a very big.
Where are you from? Thunder Bay. I grew up in Vernon.
Yeah.
I grew up in Vernon. It's like Thunder Bay. Talk about it. I love it. You bring it back to the data. My question is this: for someone such as yourself that has access to seemingly infinite amounts of data from over 65 years, how do you then avoid, or I won't say avoid, but mitigate the potential for analysis paralysis?
I'm not the right person to answer this question, because I would say the more data is the better, more analysis is the better. So
data junkie.
I think if you're not making the decision from the analysis that you're doing, that you're definitely in a paralysis. You have to be making decisions about the data. And back to my question, back to the previous question where we talked about, having data that shows you how to remarket. That's part of what we do with our retail data. We have that information that helps dealers tell you, like, where a car is at, where a specific vehicle solid. But you have to be able to make decisions in regards to the analysis you're doing. And sometimes, we work with clients who are like, well, I want to see another analysis, and I want to see another analysis, and I want to see another analysis.
Right.
I think that at some point, you have to determine how many analyses you need to do to make a decision, because that's where the paralysis comes through, in my opinion. Yeah.
That's great. I think you are the right person to answer that question. I think that was great. As we kind of start winding into the last parts of the questions I have here, 90-day forecast moves. Things are changing, interest rates, and there's so, different regulations. So my questions are, like, if rates ease or incentives spend ticks up, which leading valuation indicators blink first? Is it segment days supply? Is it auction conversions, MMR deltas? Like, what are you looking at to say, okay, here's the data I'm paying attention to give me an understanding of a 90-day window?
Supply and demand always is the data we're looking at. And I think when you talk about 90-day forecast, although we do that, we look at it short term because it is changing. And because right now we're in a current environment where two or one word can literally shift the market, shift consumer behavior. And we haven't seen that happen. We thought that we were over that during COVID, and we're back in, I don't know if back in, but we're in this new economic era of where things change so drastically. So part of what we had to change with our team is how they forecast. We do it on a daily basis, and not that we're forecasting the values every day. We have to look at it every day because it changes so drastically. And if we don't pivot and change, then all of a sudden we can be on the downturn or severely on the upturn of where it should be. So I would say you have to look at every area. You have to look at every data. You have to look at every aspect of what goes into decision making in terms of valuation process. Looking at economic data, looking at auctions, looking at consumer behavior. Consumer confidence is a big part of what we do right now, because that's in the Canadian market. That's very telling of how consumers are spending, especially going into Q4 where you're going into the holiday season, right? And typically, consumers will tend to be looking for new vehicles, and you see a lot of new vehicles coming out now. What does that confidence look like? What does that mean for new car sales? All of that is what we talk about on a daily basis here.
To be a fly on the wall.
On about it. Sorry.
to be a fly on the wall. This is so valuable. I mean, we need to be paying attention to it. Obviously, I have an affinity for inventory data and data workflows, and we're building some solutions, or trying to build some solutions on the merchandising side in particular. So I think a lot about this stuff. For those that are listening and watching, I mean, guys, we got to be paying attention to, like Yolanda just said, the market, buying sentiments, supply and demand. We have enough data that we don't need to be making too many visceral, but I feel like I need a maroon Camry. We know, we know what people are buying. And I think, the data can actually alleviate a lot of the pressure that we might be feeling and get rid of some of those visceral feelings that we have. Yolanda, this has been a delight. How can those listening and watching connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm probably one of the few people to have my phone number visible on LinkedIn, but I have nothing to hide. That's what I tell anyone. You can send me a LinkedIn and I will be happy to connect with you. So I love connecting with people. I think one of the important messages for Canadian Black Book and my team is we always want to get feedback, right? We hear our values are too high, our values are too low, and that's when we know we're right. But if we hear it's only one way, then we know we have a problem. But we like to get feedback because we're still a team of people who are actually impacting valuations, and they want to know what they're doing, if it's to be done correctly or not, and they like to hear feedback. So anyone can reach out to me. Yeah.
Love it. Yolanda.
Thank you for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Dealer Playbook podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please subscribe, share, and hit that like button. You can also join us and the DPB community on social media. Check back next week for a new Dealer Playbook episode. Thanks so much for joining.